I've been an English teacher for over a decade now, and I come from a long line of English teachers, all of whom agree with me when I ask, what's the most common question you get from students in the classroom, especially Year 11s? Without fail, the number one question we get is, how do you even revise for English? Now, I never have time to give it a proper answer, so I guess that's why we're here today. Now, when it comes to GCSE English language, that's another question for another video. But for literature, today's video is going to be the exact answer I'd love to give all my students if time weren't so limited. So in a little under 30 minutes, here's the answer to that question in full. I'm going to talk about how to set up your schedule, how to concentrate for 5 hours, how to tap into your brain structure to maximize retention, how to source practice questions to infinity, and how to become a master of the texts that you're studying. This is how you revise for GCSE English literature. Let's go.
Before we get into the rest of this video, I just wanted to direct you to the link in the description where you're going to find a revision timetable ready to complete as per this video. Just pop in your email address and I'll send it right over. Okay, let's get into it.
Oh, and quick note, it should all be relevant, but when I talk about specific question structure and certain texts, I'm operating with AQA in mind. It's the most popular exam board, and so this is how I can be most useful. So if you've been landed with Educas, sorry besties. First of all, big picture, let's set up your study program. To be the master of your time, lock your phone in a titanium safe and give the code to your mom or dad or sibling or dog or whatever. Distractions in general are a scourge. That said, a little music is good as long as it's got no lyrics. Now, some old and dubious research suggests that Baroque classical music at about 60 BPM is particularly suitable for studying to, but if violins aren't your jam, just pick something instrumental. No vocals, no lyrics, because otherwise you'll tune into those lyrics and tune out of your studies. Then it's time to set up your timetable. Now, in my experience of 20 plus years as a student and 10 plus years as an educator, the most important factor is realism. If you want to study solo for 15 hours a day, but you can barely make it through 5 hours of deliberately engaging and socially enhanced lessons in a school day, don't kid yourself. Start small and build it up. Outside of the final push for exams, 5 studying hours spread across a 7-hour workday is probably good. Weekends and holidays allow for this, but you probably need to halve it during term time during the week to fit in school, homework, exercise, nutrition, relationships, enrichment, etc. But you don't have to skip out on studying during the week full stop. To make sure that you can concentrate for those 5 hours, consider the Pomodoro method. This is a very simple way of ensuring productivity by differentiating clearly between uninterrupted study time and entirely self-directed chill time. Now, if you take a chilled approach to study, you'll get hardly anything done. And if you take a regimented approach to your chilling, you'll be miserable and unproductive too. So for Pomodoro, what you're going to do is you're going to work uninterrupted without stopping for 25 minutes, and then allocate yourself a 5-minute break for a cup of tea or even to check your phone. Let's set that to a timer. English teacher doing maths alert, 5 hours of directed focus is 5 times 60 minutes, or 300 minutes. Each period of Pomodoro study is 25 minutes long, meaning 12 Pomodoros to rack up 5 hours. Each Pomodoro has a 5-minute break tagged onto its end though, so add 12 lots of 5 minutes for these breaks, and you gain 60 minutes or an extra hour. So 6 hours in total of Pomodoro and rest at a ratio of 5 to 1. Now typically you should allocate a longer break every 4 Pomodoros for about 15 minutes instead of 5. Give yourself an hour off somewhere in the middle for lunch and maybe some exercise. So taken all together, it looks like this. 4 Pomodoros, blasting and resting, then a 15-minute break, then another 4, then lunch for an hour, and then your final 4 Pomodoros. Start at 9, lock in until lunchtime at about 1 till 2, then lock in again until day end at about 4, easy. Now, it might sound insane to allocate 2 whole hours of your already short study day to deliberate breaks, but here's the thing. Unless you're an absolute pro or on some kind of focus drug or just obscenely motivated, and hats off to you if so, you'll end up taking more than 2 hours of breaks accidentally anyway if you're not regimented like this. Make it purposeful. If your off is deliberate, then your on will flow better, believe me. As far as timetabling is concerned, you will need to diagnose what needs your attention in study and prioritize your Pomodoros accordingly. Only you know what needs work. Ask your teacher for guidance if you don't. If there are no specific tests coming up and you're starting early, hats off to you once again, then you could allocate 3 Pomodoros, so about an hour and a half, to each of the 4 areas of study. So you've got Shakespeare, the 19th century novel, the modern text, and your poetry. Over time, you can shift the ratios accordingly, with likely some extra time allocated for poetry because it contains 3 questions instead of 1. In terms of external materials beyond your schooling, the only place that I can recommend with total confidence is my resources. You can use the myriad videos and articles on there to structure your revision and know that the information that you're getting is endorsed by experienced teachers and former examiners. Next up, let's talk about the 3 T's of advanced study. So when I was invited to interview for the position of head of sixth form back in 2022, I was asked to deliver a session on revision tactics for a group of very smart and dedicated A-level students. I didn't need to think twice about it. This is what I said. The 3 T's are exactly what you need to do to take your studying to the next level, regardless of subject. The 3 T's: transform, test, and teach. Let's break that down by T. Transform first. To transform is to revolutionize your ability to retain information and ideas. How many English lessons have you sat through where you've been given a text to read? Almost all of them, I'll bet. Now, who can remember a single bit of single one if it wasn't something that you came back to? Exactly. Now, how many of you can remember a cool story that you wrote on a random Tuesday afternoon in primary school? A whole load more of you, I'll bet. The thing is, as much as we like to think as teachers that we can teach you, we can only ever do half a job. We can throw you the ball, but if you don't put your hand out to catch it, it's not being caught, you're not learning. That's what transformation is. It is getting active with your content. It is catching it, not letting it bounce off your face like a dodgeball. Transforming content in practice is literally any method by which you transform one thing into another. You've written a page of notes, transform them into a diagram. You've acquired a list of capital cities to memorize, transform them into a song or a poem. You audio recorded a lecture, transform it into summarized notes. You've got a set of sources, transform them into a hierarchy of knowledge. You get the idea. The theory, and it has a name, the generation effect, posits that if you have to generate something from within yourself, you are much more likely to commit it to memory than if you simply absorb that same information passively. So, even if you only read and understand and reword something, a process as simple as that, known as summary, you can catapult your memory game into the stratosphere. Don't sit and read like a zombie, even if you are diligently highlighting words and phrases as you go, it's just not going to work. Anecdote for you. The school that I attended myself 20 odd years ago had a science department that routinely outperformed all of the other departments in the school in terms of both progress and overall GCSE attainment. They seemed to be doing everything the same as the rest of the school, which incidentally was an Ofsted graded outstanding school, still is in fact, but there was one notable exception. In science class, we were not given access to our neat books, only our rough books. Mine had some pretty cool drawings of the Incredible Hulk on it. We had to make notes in class. Transformation number 1, from spoken and visual to written. And then we were given our neat books to take home with the standing homework every lesson of writing it up neat. Transformation number 2, from rough notes to formalized prose with diagrams. Boom, we retained way more. Everyone went on to do science subjects at sixth form, whether we were suited to them or not, because we were absolutely outstanding scientists if you looked at nothing more than our results on GCSE day. Anyway, it serves as an example of the power of transformation as a matter of course. I should also mention that there's an additional benefit in the form of what's called dual coding. This is where you combine media for enhanced absorption into your memory chest. Think of the classic, combining an image with some text. You learn more when you do that. That's how logos work. So I say Nike and you think of the swoosh. I show you the swoosh and you think of Nike. In your head, you've hung Nike up on 2 hooks. When you need to recall it, you've got double the channels to reach it. So why not combine that with transformation? Create a visual mind map of a given topic, drawing relevant images, adding arrows and links, color coding and all that jazz. And what you've done is combined the generation effect with the dual coding theory, and you've locked that information in your brain. And here's the really weird part. It's the creation of this revision resource, not the studying of it as a revision resource, that causes the big brain bonus. You could spend a week on producing it and then never look at it again. That's often better than buying a revision book and reading it every day for that same week, crazily enough. So back in school, I showed enough dedication to win the history prize. I know, go me. How I showed this dedication, most memorably though, I think, is by creating reams and reams of giant A2 mind maps, just like I described just now, with all the visual acrobatics I could muster for every topic, from medicine through time to the opening up of the American West. Yes, I remember them still, intimately, which I guess is kind of the point. And my history teacher ended up asking me, after the exams, for my permission to scan them onto the computer so that he could reproduce them for future year groups. I was obviously happy, I didn't need them anymore, but I did have to tell him, sir, I don't think they'll actually do anyone any good. I never really studied from them. I was actually just making them in the first place, and that's what, locked it in for me. He took them anyway, bless him. Love that guy. But there it is, my own experience of these abstract theories in full concrete effect. The other two T's, test and teach, can be taken together. The first T, the transforming T, lays the foundation, but these T's serve to push things to the nth degree through diagnosis. What is a diagnosis? Provided by your doctor in diagnostician mode. It's basically what's wrong with you, isn't it? So what's wrong with your understanding of GCSE English Lit? When it comes to studying any body of work, you can't feel sure you've mastered it all until you can confidently patch up all the holes that there are. You don't know where those holes are though, because they're small and maybe they're hidden beneath wide expanses of coverage. Like with a tyre that has a puncture, you plunge it into water so you can see where the bubbles escape. You have to submit your brain to that submersion, to external pressure, so you can find where those gaps are. That is what diagnosis means in the context of knowledge acquisition and retention. And testing and teaching are how you apply the pressure from which you can diagnose. Testing diagnoses the content gaps, teaching diagnoses the expression gaps. When you test yourself in controlled conditions, you end up realizing in the moment that an area of previous confidence when you had your notes in front of you is a sudden gaping chasm when your books are closed and you're flying by the seat of your pants. Then, when you get the marks back or mark it yourself, you find other areas in which there wasn't even a gap, but what I might refer to as a wrongly filed piece of information. You were confident using the name Sherlock in the exam, for example, and you didn't realize that you were supposed to be writing about Shylock until you got the marks back. Doing the test, the past paper, the online quiz, the end of unit assessment, whatever it is that you're doing, has given you both a live and a post hoc insight into your true performance and weaknesses and strength, of course. You now have two areas of priority for your next study session. The same goes for teach. Teaching your peers from class or your parents at home or strangers online pushes your knowledge, communication strategies, and lateral thinking to the maximum. Like, what if my mum has never heard of Dracula? Do I need to talk her through the origin of vampire myths and John Polidori before she understands the parasitic imperative? Should I lay the foundations of Gothic genre in the 19th century throughout its literature and how it's got this far? Maybe I need to justify why this anti-Enlightenment indulgence in subversive and retro weirdness came along via Horace Walpole in the century prior. Like, how much literary history do I need to give as context for her to understand why that book matters? Do I also need to go the other way, historically, and track the vampire trend through to Buffy and Twilight and the Vampire Diaries? Do I even have all this knowledge? Do I know the theory, the order of events? Teaching reveals these failings. The thing is, you don't know what you don't know until you know, as Socrates famously never said. So, test to identify your gaps and teach to refine your method. 3 T's nailed. But that's generic to all subjects, that concept of the 3 T's. What about specific English approaches? Well, let's finally get into that by considering question type. The most valuable tool in your arsenal, especially as you progress into mastery of your texts, is going to be practice questions. But there are different question types, so what to do? In GCSE English Literature, for AQA at least, there are 3 types of questions. Extract-based ones, like for Shakespeare, the 19th century novel, and some ways the anthology poetry. Essay-type questions, like with your modern text, because there's no extract given. And of course, finally, your commentary questions, which you'll have for unseen poetry, both parts. Now, when it comes to revising for each of these, think about dog training. right? Once you've taught your dog to stay, or yourself to compare poems, you need to increase duration, distance, and distraction if you're a dog, i.e. difficulty, and the same for you, human, except that you're increasing difficulty in terms of obscurity. That is, you need a sense of what is the hardest question that could come up, and then you need to gradually move towards it from the easy position of sitting on command. Woof. Right, so for the extract-based questions, how do you do this? Well, you flip to any random page in the text you're studying, pin it open, and look at what's before you, because that is now your extract. Give it an appropriate theme for the associated question, and then grade it on difficulty based on how hard it would be for you to answer that question on, relating to that theme, starting with that extract in an exam. As days turn into weeks, turn into months, work your way up the list from what you'd call a walk in the park, all the way up to what you'd call a cartwheel across boiling lake of lava. If we take Macbeth, for example, an easy extract might be Lady Macbeth urging Macbeth to kill Duncan, so anything from Act 1, Scene 7. And a hard one might be a few scenes later in Act 2, Scene 3, with the porter's comic rambling and brief exchange with Macduff. Now obviously, you'd never get an actual question on the porter as a character, but the extract could well be used for a question about morality or the supernatural, or even about contrasts, so it's not out of the question, pun intended. Now, working your way from easy to hard, this is how you progress, not simply by doing past papers. There's only a handful of the latter available, they all have the same challenge level, and they're all also extracts that are unlikely to recur more than once in an exam series. So for the essay-based question on the so-called modern text, where there's no extract there, you're taking a similar approach to resourcing, just without textual help. You're going to create a bank of questions based on all the characters, and then all the themes that you can think of, once again ranked in terms of challenge. So, for An Inspector Calls, for example, for characters, you have a nice short list. Mr. and Mrs. Burling, the Inspector, Gerald, Sheila, Eric, and of course the absent Eva. Now you could add Edna, Alderman Megati, the Chief Constable, etc., but you'd be wasting your time because they won't be coming up as question focuses and can't even appear in extract form as this question has no extract. For themes, you'd probably consider the obvious first, class, gender, responsibility, etc. And higher up the difficulty rankings, you could list things like intergenerational disparities, social versus criminal justice, etc. Then you're just going to repeat the process that I mentioned before. Work your way from easy to hard over the period of time that is available to you. Now, 2 quick caveats on using these resources before we move on. Number 1, early on in the process, you should do them open book and gradually reduce note usage and access to the primary text as you gain confidence and mastery. This is another way to graduate the difficulty over time. Note number 2, when time is more constrained, like during a weekday, you can always use these practice questions and extracts for generating essay plans instead of full essays. Your general argument, the subdivisions of the argument, the key quotations and contextual links you'd like to use, etc. Okay, now, unseen poetry. When it comes to the unseen poetry questions, probably the easiest way to source your unseen poems in the interest of making practice questions, once you've quickly exhausted what is on the exam board website and once you've worked through our examples on my resources, is to hop over to the other exam boards websites and snatch one from their anthology. And then again later from their past paper bank. Now, anthology poems tend to be harder than unseen poems for obvious reasons, and often longer, so pick a shorter, more accessible one, if you're being wise about it. The beauty of this approach, apart from it being a huge time saver, is that the poems that you'll find have already been grouped into clusters or themes, right, by being anthologized in the first place. So you've immediately saved the effort of finding a poem on a similar theme for your second unseen poetry question where you compare. You'll find it in the same place. What a win. There are 4 main exam boards in this country, AQA, EdXL, OCR, and Educastle WJEC, and each has its own anthology with multiple clusters of 15 poems in each. So it is a bountiful resource once you've picked through them for accessibility and thematic pairings. Again, as a note, you can always use these purely for annotation practice rather than full exam responses on days where time is tight. Okay, so now you've planned your approach and you've thoroughly resourced your practice materials, let's scale it back to the more general approaches of text mastery. Okay, I'm going to take poetry on its own first, as it is a unique beast. Okay, so my advice, take it an assessment objective at a time. That's how you'll be marked on it at the end of the day, so it's a valid strategy. For AO1, you need to break it into poem mastery and also poem comparison, because for absolutely no good reason whatsoever, JCQ have decided that there's no need for a specific AO for comparison in GCSE literature. Make it make sense. For the connections, it's easy, right? Build yourself a grid. Poems down the one side, themes across the top, and then tick the relevant boxes. For themes in the Power and Conflict anthology for AQA, for example, you might have types of power, types of conflict, the tone, etc. And once you've got this grid and it's been populated, you have two things: pairings that will pay off in the exam, and a sense of which are the most versatile, i.e. the ones that have the most themes ticked. Because that's the next step, determining which poems you want to dedicate your most time to. Some poems have extremely high versatility, like Duffy's War Photographer and deserve extra attention. For AO2 and AO3, I recommend using the acronym C first for annotations and subsequent flashcards. C is for contextual links, F is for first and last line, I for imagery, R for repetition, S for structure, and T for title. That means you only need to memorize about 5 or 6 things, especially as the titles are actually listed for you in the exam, from each poem in terms of context and quotations/annotations. If you have, say, 5 of the 15 poems locked in by exam time, which is an approach successfully taken by many students who have determined which poems are the most versatile and with which they are most confident taking in the exam, then that's only about 25 quotes. That might still sound like a lot, but this is the most efficient way to take on such a demanding feature of the GCSE. Beyond that, there's no harm in looking for trends based on previous year's exam questions, just as long as you don't predict. The only people who predict in English literature exams are charlatans, or those who don't understand how the system works. Don't get me started. Still, it's worth knowing that in previous years, for love and relationships, for example, we've had questions on growing up, romance, family relationships, and that Mother Any Distance and neutral tones have proven quite popular given poems. But it's only useful to know in terms of weighting your efforts in your favour, not as an excuse to put all of your eggs into one basket with the predicted poem. And as for unseen poetry, there is no textual mastery to be had there. It is a skill. All you can do is practice that skill on the unseen examples that you've acquired from the exam board website, my resources, and of course, your own harvesting of the anthologies from other exam boards. Okay, the next and final section is on the other units: Shakespeare, the 19th century novel, and the modern text. We take the same approach to all of these. Assessment objectives again, AO1 to AO3. For AO1, go ahead and write a summary of each full text, then each act or chapter, and then each scene if applicable, gradually getting more detailed and zoomed in. This works as it is, but to make this a transform exercise that really goes hard, why not write your summaries with different tones or genres? I guarantee you that you'll remember what happens in Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde if you write your summary as if you're a sports pundit. And here it comes. Enfield plays it forward with a grim little story. A small figure, no warning, straight through a child like a reckless challenge from behind. No attempt at the ball, no apology, just cash on the pitch and off down the tunnel. The crowd is stunned. Utterson's eyebrow goes up and you get the sense, very early doors here, that we're not looking at a friendly. Every time you rewrite these things, smaller and larger, with changing voices, you'll commit it more to memory. Play with it. Revision can be fun, I promise. For AO2, this is about quotation harvesting, isn't it? So, taking a similar method, you make yourself little pots of quotations, starting from each act/chapter, then each subdivision of the chapter, or indeed each scene if it's a play, and then each character, and finally each notable theme that you decided on earlier when sorting out your resources. Now, once you've gathered all of these, don't worry, you won't be memorizing all of them, you can start then to select your favorites from each list and write them onto a final master list, which should go on your wall at home, containing all of the most versatile quotes. So these are the ones that come up in the most of your different pots, your different lists. And then the most salient ones. These are the ones that capture the heart of the story or tone or represent a striking or memorable moment. Leave space on your master list because you'll inevitably come across and become fond of other key quotations that you omitted the first time around. especially, of course, when you're doing your open book practice essays and you keep finding quotations that are useful to the arguments that you're making. For AO3, your best bet is to take any biographies or encyclopedias or curated notes that you've already got and then start to categorize them into biographical, socio-historical, and literary/textual. As you categorize, work on shrinking the point down to its bare essentials. It's never going to be more than a sentence in a paragraph in the exam, 20% of a response in terms of marks, so the very most. So let's take something like a socio-historical piece of context for Browning's poem My Last Duchess. Maybe you've written it like this. An absolute mouthful, right? Compressed, we can just say, the Renaissance Duke of Ferrara, whose wife's suspicious death was likely by his hand. 32 words down to 14, with nothing relevant lost. Once you've categorized and compressed, it's time to start finding hooks in the relevant texts, like I gave commands and all smiles stopped together in the poem that I just gave an example from. That quotation now belongs on your master list because it is the stepping stone to contextual links for this poem in the exam. Indeed, what you're doing here is the reverse of what you do in your exam essays. Here, you're finding textual evidence for the context that you want to use. There, you're starting with the textual evidence to link out for a contextual explanation. Finally, once again, there is no harm in knowing what previous exams have asked for, to direct your attention back to the text's most salient points. Knowing that most questions on Macbeth, for example, focus on the eponymous tragic hero and/or his wife, knowing that the relationship between Romeo and Juliet has come up twice, knowing that the concept of male irresponsibility has been assessed in An Inspector Calls, these are all useful tidbits of information for directing your study. Just please don't think that you or anyone else can safely predict what's coming up in the exam. If you didn't know how to revise for your English Literature GCSE, now you do.